The sky was dark, and the rain fell without stopping. Mud covered everything: roads, cages, feet, even faces. In the middle of the slave market, under a broken roof, sat a small cage. Inside it, a girl knelt on the wet ground. Her blue skin was dirty. Her hair, once golden, now looked brown from mud. She did not speak. She did not cry. She just stared at the ground, shaking in the cold. People walked by and laughed at her. "Filthy mare," shouted one man. "Who would ever buy that thing?" Another woman said with disgust, "She's worse than an animal." Someone spat on the cage. She didn't respond. She didn't even blink. Her eyes were empty, like she had already died inside. But then he came. A human man named Mark walked slowly through the market. He wasn't rich. He wasn't a warrior. He just wanted to sell old machine parts. But when he walked past her cage, he stopped. His eyes didn't move to the expensive slaves, the strong ones, or the pretty dancers in golden chains. No, his eyes locked on her dot. Something in her broken body made him freeze. Something in her silence spoke louder than any scream. He looked at the merchant. "What's her story?" The merchant laughed. "That one? Trash. Been here for months, doesn't talk, doesn't eat much. We call her Mare. She crawls like an animal and smells worse." Mark said nothing. "You don't want her," the merchant added. "People say she came from a biolab. Failed experiment. Not even real." Mark looked back at her. Her skin was blue, but bruised. Her arms had old scars. Her knees were bleeding from crawling on sharp stones. And yet, she was still alive. "How much?" Mark asked quietly. The merchant raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" "5 credits, and she's yours." Mark gave the coins without saying another word. The crowd laughed. He bought the dirty mare. Hope he likes fleas. Watch her bite him in the night. Mark opened the cage slowly. The girl didn't move. She thought it was another joke, maybe another punishment. But when his hand reached out, gently, offering her help, her eyes blinked, just once. He waited. Finally, slowly, she reached out with a shaking hand and touched his fingers. Mud stuck between them, but he didn't pull away. He helped her stand. Her legs were weak. She nearly fell, but he caught her. The cloth around her waist barely stayed on, soaked and torn. The people laughed again, but Mark didn't care. He wrapped his old jacket around her and held her close. They walked through the rain. Her feet were bare, bleeding. Every few steps, she stumbled, but she kept moving. For the first time in a long time, someone had chosen her. When they reached Mark's small home on the edge of the city, she was wet, cold, and silent. He gave her a warm blanket, a clean towel, and pointed to the washroom. She didn't go in. She stood near the door and looked at him. Confused, he gently pushed the towel toward her again. "It's okay. You can clean yourself. You're safe here." Still, she did not move. So Mark placed the towel on a chair and stepped away. Giving her space, she slowly entered the small room. The light flickered. She turned on the water and stared. Water came clean, warm, soft on her hands. She touched her face. The mud fell away. Underneath was blue, glowing skin. She looked into the mirror and didn't recognize herself. She washed for the first time. She washed tears mixed with clues. Tears mixed with water. She wasn't sure why she was crying when she stepped out. Clean and wrapped in the towel, Mark was making soup. He looked up and smiled. "You look better," he said softly. She didn't answer. He placed a bowl in front of her and sat down. "At the other side of the table, you can stay here. For now. You don't have to talk. Just rest." She looked at the food. She reached for the spoon, slow and careful. She ate one bite, then another. Then she ate the whole bowl. After finishing, she stared at him for a long time. He smiled again. "My name is Mark," he said. She didn't reply, but her lips moved. Just a little, almost like she wanted to try. He pointed to her. "You." She hesitated, and then, in the softest whisper he had ever heard, she spoke one word. "Mare." Mark shook his head. "No," he said gently, "not anymore." The rain had stopped, but the sky still looked tired. Inside the small shelter near the edge of the city, the alien girl sat quietly on a soft mat. Her clean skin still glowed faintly under the dim yellow lights. Her hair, now free of mud, had soft golden strands that fell to her shoulders. She wore a simple gray shirt and long pants, both too big for her, but dry and clean. Mark worked quietly in the kitchen corner, washing dishes. He didn't say much. He didn't ask questions. He only looked at her once in a while to make sure she was okay. She kept glancing at the door. She didn't understand this place. It was too quiet. No guards, no cages. No one shouted or threw things. She didn't trust it. This wasn't normal. Back in the market, kindness didn't exist. If someone was soft, it meant danger. If someone smiled, it meant they were about to hurt you. But Mark had done nothing. She kept waiting for the trap. That night, Mark prepared a small bed in the corner of the room. He placed a soft blanket and a clean pillow there. Then he pointed to the bed and nodded. "You can sleep there." She didn't move. He walked to his own room and said gently, "Good night." She waited for hours, sitting still. No chains, no lock on the door, no whip hidden under the table. She finally crawled into the bed and curled up, pulling the blanket over herself. For the first time in years, she slept without fear. Morning light crept through the window. Birds chirped outside, soft sounds she hadn't heard in years. Mark was already awake. He sat near the door, fixing a broken metal tool. When she stepped out of the room, he didn't look up right away. She stood silently, waiting for an order. "You hungry?" he asked, finally glancing at her. She nodded slowly. He smiled. "Sit. I made something simple." He handed her a piece of toasted bread and a hot drink. She stared at it. Food was never given without pain. In the past, eating something meant she would be punished later. Mark watched her, his voice gentle. "It's yours, no tricks." Still unsure, she ate. Slowly at first, then faster. When she finished, she looked at him and whispered, "Why?" Mark blinked. "Why? Why help?" she asked, her voice rough but clearer than before. He looked at her long and hard before answering. "Because you looked like you needed help," he said simply. She didn't believe him. Not yet. Later that day, Mark worked on his old farming drone outside. The girl watched from the window. She didn't understand this world. He lived alone, fixed machines, and barely spoke. He didn't touch her. He didn't ask her to work. He just let her exist. She slowly stepped outside. The ground was dry now, and the sun was warm. Mark glanced at her and nodded. "You can come closer if you want." She hesitated, then walked toward him and sat in the dirt. Not too close. He handed her a small metal part. "You ever seen this before?" She studied it. "Control chip." Mark raised an eyebrow. "You know, tech." She nodded. "Worked in lab. Before, they threw me away." He frowned. "Threw you away?" She nodded again. There was silence. Then she said, "I was broken." Mark looked at her. She wasn't broken. She had been broken by others. But she was still here, still breathing, still fighting to understand kindness. "You're not broken," he said softly. She didn't reply, but something in her chest ached. No one had ever said that to her. That evening, Mark sat near the fire, reading a digital screen. She sat across from him, sipping soup slowly. The warmth inside her body now matched the warmth around her. She looked up. Name? He smiled. Mark. She pointed to herself. Mare. He shook his head. That's not your real name. She blinked. You can choose a new one. Something better. She looked down, thinking. She had never been asked to choose anything in her life. Later, she whispered. He nodded. Whenever you're ready. She stared at the fire, feeling something strange inside. Something soft. Something dangerous. Hope that night, when Mark had gone to bed, she stood silently near his door. She listened. No chains. No anger. No sound of pain. Only breathing. She returned to her bed and curled up again. This time, she slept with her eyes closed. She was still afraid, but less than before. She didn't know it yet. But the first stone of a new life had been placed. The sun was shining softly through the window when she woke up. For a few seconds, the alien girl didn't move. She waited for someone to kick her, shout at her, or drag her out. But there was no pain. No voices, only the smell of something warm. Cooking, she sat up slowly, blinking. The small blanket had slipped off her shoulders, and her golden hair was now messy, but clean. Her skin was glowing faintly in the morning light. She heard footsteps. Mark appeared at the doorway, holding a plate with toast and fruit. He smiled. Good morning. She looked away. Unsure, he placed the plate gently on the small table and stepped back. You slept well. She gave a tiny nod. You can eat when you're ready, he said. He didn't ask questions. It didn't try to touch her. He just gave her space. When he left the room, she sat at the table and picked up a slice of toast. It was warm and buttery. She took a bite, and for the first time in a long time, liked the taste. Later that day, Mark worked outside on the drone again. She stayed inside, but kept watching him through the small window. His hands were strong, rough from fixing machines, but they moved gently. He never raised his voice. Never acted like the others. She walked over to the mirror on the wall. She stared at her reflection. The girl in the mirror had blue skin, bright, gold hair, and eyes that once had no life, but now held something. Soft, hope. She reached up and touched her cheek. Smooth, clean. This skin had once been covered in dirt, blood, and shame. Now, it looked like her. The real her. That evening, after dinner, Mark pulled out a large metal tub and placed it in the room with soft lights. You don't have to, he said gently, but if you'd like, I can bring warm water. A bath. She stiffened in her. Old life baths were cold punishments. Hoses, laughter from guards. Bruises followed, but he stood back, respectful, careful not to get close. It's safe, he said. No one will hurt you here. She didn't answer, but after a long pause, she walked to the tub. He filled it with warm water, steam rising gently. Then he stepped away and left her alone, shutting the door behind him. The girl sat on the edge of the tub and touched the water with her fingers. Warm, she slipped in slowly. Her body shivering not from cold, but from the memory of pain. She washed. Quietly, she found soft soap and used it on her arms, her neck, her legs. The dirt washed away, leaving behind glowing blue skin, soft and smooth. Her body was thin, but strong. She had survived so much. When she looked in the mirror again, she almost didn't recognize herself. Not a mare, not an animal, a girl, a woman. Alive, she came out of the room. Wrapped in a soft towel, her cheeks were slightly pink. Her golden hair was damp, hanging around her face like threads of sunlight. Mark looked up and blinked. You look. He paused, then smiled gently, like yourself. She didn't know how to reply. He gave her new clothes, simple, soft pants and a shirt. She took them and changed silently. Then she sat across from him at the small table. He poured her tea and passed a biscuit. "You know," she said softly, "you don't have to be afraid to talk here." She looked at him, her lips pressed tightly. Then, after a moment, she whispered, "I don't know what to say." "That's okay," he said. "We can sit in silence too." And so they did. But it wasn't an awkward silence. It was warm, gentle, peaceful. And then something happened. She smiled. It was small, quick, just the corner of her mouth lifting for a second. But Mark saw it, and he smiled back. Saying nothing, that night she didn't curl into a ball like before. She stretched out on her bed, relaxed. Her hands rested over her stomach. Her breathing was soft. The lights were off, and Mark sat quietly in the other room, sipping tea and thinking. He thought about her smile. Just that small smile meant something. Big had changed. She wasn't a slave anymore. She wasn't just surviving. She was beginning to live. The next morning was quiet. The girl stood near the window, holding a warm mug between her hands. She had learned how to make tea now, even though she still spilled sometimes. Her golden hair was tied in a loose knot behind her head. The soft gray shirt she wore had tiny wrinkles, but it was clean like her. Outside, she saw Mark working. In the garden, fixing an old fence. She smiled. She didn't know why she smiled. It just came naturally. For once, she wasn't scared of the next minute. She didn't expect pain. She expected peace. But peace never lasts long in a cruel world. That afternoon, the sound of loud voices echoed through the dirt. Road leading to Mark's home. 3 men walked toward the small shelter neighbors from the town. Behind them, a woman in a long coat carried a tablet. Her eyes were sharp and cold. Mark noticed them first. He stood tall, his hands covered in dirt, and wiped them on a towel. The girl peeked through the window and froze. She remembered those kinds of eyes. Eyes that judged. Eyes that destroyed. The man in the middle scoffed. "So the rumors are true, Mark. You brought that thing home." Mark replied calmly, "Her name is not Thing." The woman stepped forward. "We have laws about alien animals, especially those that come from black markets. You have no license for her." "She's not a pet," Mark said firmly. "She's a person." The woman laughed. "Really? A person who lived in a cage, who crawled on all fours and didn't speak?" Mark said nothing. "She's dangerous." Another man added, "What if she bites someone? Or worse?" "She hasn't hurt anyone," Mark replied. "She just needed help." The woman looked past Mark, toward the window. The girl stepped back. Hiding that night, Mark sat at the table with his head in his hands. He looked tired, more tired than usual. The girl sat quietly across from him. Her hands gripped her cup tightly. "I made things worse for you," she whispered. "No," Mark said, looking up. "You didn't. They hate me," she said. "I saw it in their faces." "They hate what they don't understand," he replied. "They don't know you." She looked down. Maybe they're right. Mark stood up and walked over. He knelt beside her. "Listen to me. You're not dirty. You're not an animal. They don't get to decide who you are. You do." She looked into his eyes, unsure if she believed it, but part of her wanted to. The next day, a small notice was posted on Mark's door. Warning, unauthorized alien residing. Here, subject to removal. Mark tore it down and threw it into the fire. The girl saw it before he burned it. Her heart sank. "They'll come again," she said. "I know," he replied. "They'll take me." "No," Mark said. "They'll have to go through me first." Later that evening, she stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection again. Her fingers brushed over the soft shirt, the clean skin, the small silver hairpin. Mark had given her to hold her hair. She didn't look like the creature they remembered. She didn't feel like Mare. She touched her chest. "I need a real name," she whispered. When Mark returned from outside, she was waiting near the door. He raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" She nodded. Then added, "I choose a name." Mark smiled. "Let's hear it, Lyra," she said softly. "It was my mother's name, I think." "Elira," he repeated. "It's beautiful." She smiled, for the second time in her life. She smiled without fear, but peace was fading. That night, she heard whispers outside the house. Men in uniforms, flashlights moving. Voices saying her name the wrong way. Elira crouched in the dark. Corner of the room, hugging herself tightly, Mark opened the door and walked outside. "What do you want?" he asked. The officer replied, "The alien girl must be turned in. She's not registered. She's illegal." "She's free," Mark said. "She's not a slave. She's not human." The man spat. "And if she doesn't leave, we'll take her by force." Mark stood tall. "Then you'll have to fight me." Inside, Elira listened. Her heart raced. She had seen men fight for money, for power, or pleasure, but never for her. Never like this. She whispered to herself, "Why do you protect me when I don't deserve it?" But deep inside, a voice answered, soft and honest, "Because he sees you, because you matter." The officers left for now, but Mark knew they'd return soon. And next time, they wouldn't just talk. Still, when he walked back in and saw Elira sitting silently, he didn't show fear. "We'll figure this out," he said. She looked up, and for the first time, she replied, not with silence, but with trust. "I believe you," she whispered. The night was heavy. Mark was asleep in his room, but Elira was wide awake. She sat on her small bed, staring at the blanket pulled over her knees. The wind outside howled gently, but the louder sound was in her mind, voices of the past, voices from the cage, voices that laughed and called her Mare. She looked at the bag by the wall. It was small, already packed with a few things she had. The old hairpin Mark gave her, the soft scarf, a piece of fruit, and the spare clothes. She had made her choice. She couldn't stay anymore. "He'll be in danger because of me," she thought. "The humans will come again, and next time they'll hurt him." She stood and moved quietly toward the door. Her bare feet made no sound. She looked back one last time at the little home, warm lights, the wooden table, the peaceful space where, for the first time, someone had called her by a real name, Elira. It hurt to leave that name behind, but she had to. The road was cold. She walked fast, pulling her scarf tighter. Each step away from the house felt like a knife in her chest. She didn't know where she would go. The cities hated her. The forests were full of danger. But still, it was better than putting Mark at risk. Better I suffer than him, she thought. But she didn't know. Mark had heard the door. He woke the moment it clicked shut. Years of living alone had sharpened his instincts. When he saw her bed empty and her bag gone, he didn't panic. He pulled on his boots, grabbed a flashlight, and followed the tracks in the soft dirt road. He moved fast. His breath came heavy in the cold night air. "Elira," he shouted into the darkness. No answer. "Elira, come back. You don't have to do this." Still no voice, but she had heard him. From behind a rock, she froze. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. Why was he chasing her? Why wasn't he angry? She tried to keep walking, but Mark caught up to her. He stood in front of her, blocking the path. She turned her face away. "Go back, please." "No. You'll get hurt. They'll come. They'll take me. They'll hurt you too." He stepped closer. "Let them try." "You don't understand," she cried, her voice cracking. "They call me names. They hate me. I'm nothing. I'm not even human." Mark didn't yell. He didn't argue. He stepped forward and gently placed his coat around her shoulders. "You're not nothing," he said. "You're a Lyra, you're kind, you're strong. You're more human than those who called you filthy." She looked up at him. Her eyes were wide, filled with tears. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care?" Mark sighed, his voice low and honest. "Because when I looked at you in that cage, I saw someone who hadn't given up even after everything. And I thought, she still has that fire, then she deserves to be free." Alira dropped the bag and fell to her knees. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. Mark knelt beside her. "You deserve more than this, more than mud, more than shame. You deserve a life." Silence passed between them. Only the wind spoke. Then Alira said something she had never said before. ... "I want to stay." Mark smiled softly. "Then let's go home." Back at the house, Mark made her sit by the fire. He gave her a blanket and hot tea. She held the cup close, her hands still shaking. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "You don't have to be," he replied. "You were scared. I just didn't want to be the reason you got hurt." Mark looked at her. "You're not a burden, Alira. You're family now. No one takes that from you." She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she believed it. That night, he didn't sleep in a ball. She didn't watch the door in fear. She slept on her side. Hand tucked under her cheek, the blanket rising and falling gently with each breath, and this time, Mark slept deeply too, because both of them knew something had changed. She wasn't trying to escape anymore. She was choosing to stay. The next morning, the air felt different. Alira stood at the small kitchen counter, clumsily slicing fruit. The sun lit up her golden hair. Her hands still trembled a little when she worked. But she was learning. Mark was sitting at the table, quietly fixing an old circuit chip. He watched her with a soft smile. Not like a master, not like a rescuer, like a friend. She placed a small plate in front of him. "Her first breakfast offering. It's not perfect," she said shyly. He took a bite and smiled. "Tastes better than anything I've made." She lowered her head, blushing. That day, Mark didn't go out to the market. He stayed close. He could feel it. Something was building. Tension in the village. Whispers about him, about her. Alira noticed too, but this time she didn't suggest leaving. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't hide in a corner. Instead, she walked out into the garden with Mark and helped plant small seeds. Her fingers dug into the soil not to crawl, but to grow. "You're good at this," Mark said. "I remember," Alira replied. "Before. The cages, I used to help grow things." "That was you," Mark nodded. "Still is." That evening, she brushed her hair in front of the mirror. Her reflection no longer scared her. She didn't see a filthy mare anymore. She saw Alira, strong, quiet, healing. Later, by the fire, she sat beside Mark on the floor. She looked into the flames and said, "You never asked why I was in that cage. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." She nodded. "They used us for tests. Biolabs. I escaped once, but no one helped me. They just threw me into that market." Mark didn't ask more. He didn't pity her. He just listened. She continued, voice steady. "But you didn't look at me like a tool or a monster." He smiled softly. "Because you're not." Silence followed for a few moments. Then Alira turned to him, her voice quiet but firm. "I want to stay, not just for safety. I want to belong somewhere. With you." Mark's eyes met hers. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached over and gently took her hand. "Then stay, as long as you want." She smiled. "Forever?" His answer was simple. "Forever?" In the following days, Alira changed. She helped clean the house. She organized Mark's tools. She even learned to cook real meals, laughing softly when she burned the rice. She began to laugh more, and Mark began to laugh with her. They planted flowers outside the door. She gave each one a name. Mark joked, "You're naming plants now." "They deserve names too," she said, "just like I did." One rainy afternoon, Elira found an old necklace in a box. It was simple, just a silver chain with a small glass stone. She held it up. "Was this yours?" Mark shrugged. "Used to belong to my mother." She stared at it, then slowly placed it around her neck. Mark looked at her for a moment. His heart beat faster. He stood up, walked over, and took her hand again. "Elira, I want to ask you something." She blinked, unsure. "I know you've been through pain. I know this world hasn't been kind to you. But if you feel the same way I do..." He paused. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple copper ring, no gold, no shine. "But it's real," he said. She stared at it, wide-eyed. "I don't care what others say," Mark continued. "You're not dirty. You're not weak. You're Elira. And I'd be proud if you'd be my wife." She covered her mouth. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from something she never thought she'd feel again. "Joy, you want to marry me?" she whispered. Mark nodded. "Yes." Her lips trembled as she gave a small laugh. "Even though I used to be in a cage, especially because of that," he smiled. "Because you survived it." She took the ring, her fingers shaking. "I've never belonged anywhere before," she said. "But with you, I feel like I do." "Then say yes." She did, with tears in her eyes and a smile on her face. She whispered, "Yes." The day of their quiet wedding began with sunlight and the smell of fresh bread. Mark woke up early and trimmed the garden. Elira braided her hair and cleaned the small front room. She wore a soft white dress made from simple cloth, a gift from a kind old trader in town who didn't ask questions. Around her neck hung the silver necklace Mark's mother had once worn. There were no guests, no flowers, no music, no priest. But there was something more powerful than all of that. There was choice. For the first time in her life, Elira was choosing her own future. She stepped outside, and Mark was waiting beside a tree they had planted together weeks ago. Its green leaves danced in the breeze. Mark's hands were rough but steady as he held the small copper ring between his fingers. Elira's eyes sparkled like morning dew. He didn't give a long speech. He just said, "You make this place feel alive." She smiled. "You made me feel human." Mark placed the ring gently on her finger, and she whispered, "I do." That evening, they sat side by side on the porch, watching the sunset. Elira leaned her head on Mark's shoulder. "Do you remember the day you found me?" she asked. "I'll never forget it," Mark replied. "I thought I was going to die in that cage. I had already given up. But you didn't," he said. "You were still breathing. That meant hope." She chuckled softly. "You saw something in me that I couldn't see myself." "I saw someone worth saving," he said. Elira looked down at the ring on her finger. "They called me a filthy mare. Do you remember that?" He nodded, his jaw tightening. "I hated that name." "It doesn't hurt anymore," she said. "Because I'm not that anymore." "No," he agreed. "You're Elira, my wife." Word spread slowly through the nearby village. Some still whispered behind closed doors. Some laughed. Some called it unnatural. But just a few stopped and watched when they saw Mark and Elira walking hand in hand through the market. They saw the way she held her head higher, the way Mark never let go of her hand. A young girl once pointed and asked her mother, "Is she the alien from the cages?" And the mother replied, "No, sweetheart. That's Mr. Mark's wife." Elira didn't need the world to change. She only needed one person to see her as something more. And she had found him. Their home was still small, their garden still growing, and the night still quiet, but now it was full of warmth, laughter, and life. She began writing again, using an old screen Mark had repaired. Her language was slow, but her words were beautiful. She wrote about cages and scars, about rain and mud, but also about firelight and freedom. She wrote about a man who gave her more than food or shelter. He gave her dignity. One day, she found the old market again. The same cage was still there, now empty and rusted. She stood in front of it and said nothing for a long time. Mark stood beside her, watching her closely. "Do you want to leave?" he asked. "No," she whispered. "I want to say goodbye." She stepped forward, touched the cold metal bars, and then turned away. "I'm not a prisoner anymore," she said. Mark reached out and gently took her hand. "Let's go home." Back at the house, Elira placed a small flower beside the tree. Where they married, a red, one strong, bold, and bright. She gave it a name. "Hope," she said. Mark smiled. "I thought you already used that name for me." She laughed and kissed his cheek. "You're the reason I learned it." That night, as the stars blinked above their roof and the wind sang through the trees, Elira sat with Mark under a warm blanket. Her head rested on his shoulder, and her voice was soft but full of peace. "Thank you for choosing me," she said. Mark turned and whispered, "No. Thank you for staying."